Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today on this webinar. Really great conversation all about multi-purpose venues and the challenges of sound design, sound implementation. We've got a great conversation today with a panel of experts and a bunch of good information to help you guys around the world learn more while we're all stuck at home thanks to COVID-19. I want to bring on and introduce my panel coming to us from just outside of Fort Worth, Texas, I believe. Bill, is that where you are? Is this your house or your office?
Yeah, I'm at home in Keller, just north of Fort Worth right now.
Excellent. And how's the barbecue? Is it still good in Texas?
Yeah, it's always good in Texas. I'm doing a little bit more self-barbecue, so I learned a little more myself about barbecuing.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully you get to have the controlled smoke barbecue and not the brush fire barbecue of Texas in the hot summer. Bill, thank you very much for joining us. Bill, you are the Assistant General Manager of Dickies Arena, is that correct?
Yes, I am. My role, obviously, as Assistant General Manager, covers a wide array of things. Fortunately, I was brought in this project a few months before we broke ground and was able to be part of the construction process throughout. So very fortunate to be part of that process.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Bill, for joining us. I'm really looking forward to hearing your expertise on what it takes to be a part of a project like this from the very beginning through obviously operation and now these more interesting times. Andy, you are at Dickies Arena in your office, correct?
I am, yeah, down here in the basement, making sure things are up and running whenever we get back going.
Excellent. Well, Andy, thank you for joining us today. I know it's a really unique facility that does a whole a cross section of different types of entertainment, and that obviously poses specific challenges in your technical services manager roles. I can only imagine what you might experience in a normal week from show to show.
Yeah, I mean, it's we run the gamut here. We've got rodeo, we got basketball, we got gymnastics, concerts, family shows, a lot of different stuff, a lot of things to keep moving. So, been fun.
Excellent. Excellent. And to help with us today in this conversation, Dan Palmer, Business Development Manager, specifically for sports facilities. Thank you for joining us from your house in, it looks like you're either in Texas or in front of the factory. I can't quite tell.
I'm in a virtual world right now, somewhere near Simi Valley, California. So
excellent. Dan, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you a first-time participant on one of these webinars. Thank you, Dan, for joining us. And longtime favorite, you guys will know him from great webinars like System Fundamentals, I believe it was. Oh, he's on this side of me over here. Vic, thank you for coming again. Oh, Vic has bought everyone a beer. So if you're watching live right now, guys, send Vic your address. It's the.
Hey, good morning, guys.
there you are.
There you are. Thanks, Vic. Vic, you are application touring support, and obviously this is about a sports facility install. This is kind of confusing, except of course we have a lot of touring shows that come through these types of facilities around the world, don't we?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Vic. Gino, you are, I believe, from golf terms, you are probably about a par 5 and a par 4 away from the office in your apartment, your condo in Westlake Village.
Yeah, that sounds right. I think I can actually see the office from here if I try hard enough. I'm up on a hill.
You can see the office from your
Westlake
porch.
Village.
Okay, good. Got
Yes.
it. Good.
Yeah, it's still there.
Okay, got it. Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, Gino. You're obviously been with L-Acoustics for a while now. You've been on a couple of these webinars. Gino, your application engineer, specifically on consultant outreach, and you help with the people that specify these places, right?
Yes, exactly.
Good. And so, Dan, I want to kick it to you first. You want to just kind of tell us a little bit about the facility, maybe, and a general introduction. I think that would be great.
Absolutely. So Dickies Arena obviously is a true multi-use venue. We takes a huge team, obviously, to pull something like this off. Major construction project. We're so excited to be involved and work with Bill and his team. We'll talk about all the different folks that did the design work on this and construction as well. But I'd like to engage Bill and Andy right now a little bit, just kind of talk about the vision and talk about Mr. Bass and his vision of Dickies Arena.
Sure, thanks, Dan. Dickies Arena was a pioneering private-public partnership that helped fund the arena. A small, I'm trying to think back to the numbers, but overall, let's call it a $600 million arena. $325 million of that came through the city. The rest of that was actually a philanthropic gift, which was led by Mr. Bass. And as you can kind of see from images, it is a very complimentary arena to Will Rogers, which is where the rodeo was hosted prior to moving to Dickies Arena. So we were designed for the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. That's our main tenant, which occurs 23 days from January to February. But then as Andy said, we are a true multi-purpose arena, and you'll kind of hear later on the different configurations and types of events that we host throughout the arena.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to talk, obviously, in the construction side, acknowledgement to the team at WJHW, of course, Jack Wrights and his team, Brad Lundy, Stu Schatz, Kevin Day, the whole team there. Outstanding work on the design side. We work closely with them. Also, want to mention Chris Jordan and the L-Acoustics team on integration. So what was your experience with the entire team on this, on the integration side?
It was fantastic. And, I think some of the remarkable features in this arena that obviously help with the sound quality is the acoustical treatments that are kind of created throughout. When you step inside Dickies Arena, it is truly like no other arena in the country. It is very, very high end. We always say it's like going to an upscale theater as you go inside. But they did not spare anything when it came to acoustical treatments throughout. So, it was a phenomenal process.
Excellent, excellent. And then as far as formats, what I've got a shot up here of the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, which is the main tenant, and really key to the inception of the arena and the history of the entire Fort Worth Stock and Rodeo. Can you speak to that and some of the other multi-use events that you're holding?
Before we jump into that, I think for all of us who are not from Texas or maybe have never been to a rodeo before, can you guys put in perspective what a rodeo means to a city, what the stock show means to a city in Texas? It's a experience I've been lucky enough to be a part of through some of the different stock shows and rodeos in Texas. But for those people in France and Germany and Italy and South Africa, what is this event in terms of the city itself?
So, the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo started in 1896. Really, it started as a vehicle to, show livestock and sell livestock. Obviously, throughout the years, it evolved. And in 1908, Fort Worth actually moved the rodeo to the Northside Coliseum, became the first indoor rodeo in the world, actually. And through the years, the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo has really become, the #1 event in Fort Worth. You walk around Fort Worth, everybody gets involved. And I think, one of the big aspects, you look at, arenas throughout America, usually led by a professional sports team that kind of help fund the arena and keep revenue generated. Again, this is our only tenant. It occurs for 23 days out of the year. And we sold 40 suites. I think we sold 3,000 club seats. And there's 256 rodeo boxes down below that is a luxury suite, kind of like a NFL field suite. All sold out throughout the year, thanks to the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo and the rodeo performances. So I think that shows gratitude of how much support the city gives that event.
That's really cool. So if I were to equate this, maybe those of you who have been lucky enough to be, is this maybe like for a city, this is Oktoberfest in Germany, this is the city celebration that goes on for a month, and obviously the picture we see is the event that happens every night, but there's also festivities all around the city for 23 straight days. And this is in usually what time of year does this usually happen?
So it starts mid-January and goes through early February.
Oh, cool. So the rodeo happened this year. So you guys actually didn't get
We
blocked.
did, yes. We
Yeah,
were
that's great.
able to host the first rodeo at Dickies Arena. So, you know, we've had our first rodeo. We've been through our first rodeo.
Hey, there you go. That's all right. We're done for the day, guys. That's all we have to say. We've it's not our first rodeo. Excellent. So what other kinds of events do you guys have at there? Is it more than just the rodeo? I mean, if this year wasn't COVID-19, how many events, Andy, would you be taking in and out of this venue every year? Like, is it one a month? Is it one a week?
The goal is between about 150 and 175 total per year. We've already done a number of top flight concerts. We've had monster trucks in here, a couple college basketball games. We're setting ready for the American Athletic Conference Men's Basketball Championship. We would have been hosting the NCAA Women's National Championships for gymnastics, some Olympic trials for gymnastics, Disney on Ice, Cirque du Soleil, a lot of high school and college graduations. Pretty much, you know, every week, imagine the arena flipping over to a different deal. We've done some black tie dinners and some galas, some different fundraising events. Really been a busy building just since we opened in November.
Oh, wow. So already you've done pretty much everything from sports to music entertainment to special events. I can imagine there's even times you set up on the floor and do a dinner party for a private event. Is the arena floor itself the only space within the building, or are there multiple spaces that you can also break out to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a good shot of the pavilion space, which is about a 10,000 square foot space. Small arrays in there that we can use. We've used it as a club and a bar prior to one of those fundraising events you talked about. Actually, during rodeo, that fills with dirt and the horses warm up in there. Kind of a unique use of a beautiful space otherwise. There's about 100,000 square feet in a convention space around it. We've got a couple flexible event rooms, some bars, some clubs, all the stuff you find at a mainstream arena that we rent out for other events as well.
Got it. And do you often have, is on the booking for the past or the future, do you have multiple events happening at the same time, different events, or is it generally somebody owns the entire building?
I think, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, mostly it's complementary events, that it's one major event with sub-events around it. Don't really break up the facility so far on separate events yet.
Yeah, we haven't. We wanted to kind of, as we opened the building, sort of take that with precaution. You know, we were sort of nervous about having a heavy metal concert in the arena and a, little more low-key event in the warm-up pavilion. But I think as we learn the building, we'll probably push the limit on that.
Yeah, so Grandma's 85th birthday party is probably not happening the same night that Rammstein is playing the floor of the arena.
Exactly.
You never know what Grandma's into, though. This might be the right combination. So, well, that's really cool. So obviously, different types of scenarios, different types of venues. Where did the process begin for the sound system design? Like, what was step one for Dickies Arena and the organization managing it? What was the very first thing they did?
So I'll kind of take a step back. This arena, actually, the design for this arena came to life in 2006, so a while ago, and it went through a lot of iterations. And I think at the time the thought process was just sort of kind of improve the sound system from Will Rogers and bring it into Dickies Arena. As we kind of came underway and really started to see the opportunities of events that this arena could hold, and this kind of happened as we just started construction. We sat down with the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, kind of took another look at the design of the sound system, and really they looked and said, if we're going to install this, we're probably going to end up adding some supplemental sound for our event. So we really sort of, clean slate, started over, took another hard look at the sound system and said, we need something that's really going to improve the production quality of the arena. So we went through a whole new extensive bid process in the middle of construction. And we're very fortunate and lucky that we got L-Acoustics on board and we got the sound system we did.
Excellent. Well, and so you guys worked with WJHW, which was the acoustical consultant, and AV specifier as well, correct?
Yeah, we work with L-Acoustics as well as WJHW, and it wasn't an easy process. Especially as we were, all the drawings were done. A lot of the designers thought their pencils were, they'd put their pencils down and move on, and we kind of put a wrench in that and said, time out. Let's start all over.
Yeah, you know what? It reminds me a lot. I think everyone who's owned a car or a house completely understands. You're thinking about repainting the walls, and your significant other says, "I love yellow," and you paint the first half of the wall yellow, and it turns out that's a terrible choice. And it's only as you start to think about the process and step back sometimes that you come to the best solution. And I'm obvious. Thank you from L-Acoustics, obviously, that we were able to help you guys in that. I think it's really great to see. So let's understand a little bit about that was the start of the system, and it took you a while to get there. What was like the base specifications? Were there was it what were the basic goals? Was it to be the sound system for the rodeo? To be the sound system for the rodeo and the sporting events, to be the sound system for the rodeo, the sporting events, and the concerts? Did you envision that it could do everything, or do you still think? And I'll direct this to Andy. Do you think that sometimes you're going to have to supplement this?
So wide range of uses. So one of the most challenging things about the arena is when you look at the basketball floor being 96 feet long, 46 feet wide, versus the rodeo floor being 250 feet by 125. We've got massively different playing surfaces. Got massively different crowd configurations based on what the seating maps you're seeing kind of flip through. So we tried to find a system that worked for all of those. We didn't want to have to supplement. We didn't want to have to bring in extra stuff for the rodeo, different stuff for basketball. We wanted to find whether this was, right now, that picture you're seeing, we're getting ready to set up for basketball. Bringing in the seats, bringing everybody close, getting the energy down on the floor for the players, for the guests, for everybody involved, making sure that we've got one solution, but also having a rider compliance solution that we can bring in major North American touring acts and say, look, you can either tie into our system and use it as part of a delay, or what we've done, and George Strait will get into that a little bit more, we use that as the primary system for the show. So to be able to hit graduations, basketball, gymnastics, rodeo, concerts, everything in between, and not have to supplement was a big part of it. And that's one of the things we didn't see from the initial design was we were going to have to supplement for a lot of those things, and we wanted to get away from that.
Got it. And Bill, do you see as obviously managing a facility like this? Do you see the high quality sound system as a selling asset to attract customers? Do you see it as an ease of use when you're negotiating with tenants and so on and so forth? Versus say the adequate system versus the premium system. Does that give you a benefit, on the business side?
Absolutely. I think, a lot of, most touring acts are not going to come in and use the sound system, but, there is that opportunity, like a George Strait, a center stage show, I think we'll be able to use it no problem. As we look at, bringing in other clients, other events, things like that, we can show them the quality of production that they can put on in this bowl, and it really is the cherry on top that does help sell this arena time and time again.
Hey, Bill, I have a question on that. Being that all these different configurations are different seating capacities, so Dickies Arena maximum is about 14,000 seats, 13.3 for basketball, 12.2 for hockey. When you're looking at different concert setups here, do you have an opportunity? Obviously, your maximum seating's in that center stage configuration. Does it sort of open the door for discussions on more center stage type of shows? What's the how does that scenario play out?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we all know, a lot of artists have a particular way how they want that stage set up, and today's age with the B stages and stuff like that, sometimes it becomes difficult. But I do think it can become a cost savings measure for some acts that come in that they don't have to travel with all that gear. They can, and it was the case for George Strait. They didn't have to travel with all the gear. They were able to hook it right up. But yeah, I definitely think it allows that conversation to happen, and it truly what we always say is we do want to be multi-purpose. We want to be flexible and change however that event wants it to be. And I think this allows just another opportunity for them to, either save cost or change their configuration or add more seats. Like, it definitely helps.
And I'm going to bounce this real quick to Vic. Vic, your background, you've been touring with some of the biggest pop acts around the world for the last 10 or 12 years before you came to work for L-Acoustics here. And you know what it's like to show up on tour and have a really high quality sound system in an arena. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. How often do you tie into it? And is it, maybe dependent on the size of the show you're doing? Is it, maybe dependent on the venue and the set design, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate summary. I think one of the nice things about these kind of situations is we have the information available, so I can make decisions on what portion of the system I want to integrate into the touring system. Again, we have prediction files. Gino's going to get into it, I think, a little more here. We have information about frequency response, target SPL, things like that. So I can take a look at that ahead of time and make an evaluation as to what I can do to balance the two together to get the best results for the audience.
Yeah, and it's been a long time since I toured, Vic. It's been almost 15 years now, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately. When I was touring, I walked into an arena and it was really a lucky day to see like a high quality distributed point source array. Bill, I'm sure you remember those in some of the past venues you've been a part of. And at best, you could understand the fact that the game was over. And at best, you could maybe hear the commercial that was playing between the TV breaks. Right now, I mean, the desire for quality is so much higher. Is there Gino, is there a specific like STI we're going for? Is there a specific speech intelligibility index? Is there a design side that we try to hit? Like, what's the objectives nowadays versus maybe 10 or 15 years ago?
Well, I'd say it's definitely much higher than it was. Dan, maybe you recall the specific STI requirement here, but one of the things that we could do now with these, let's say, larger, much controlled line sources versus, let's say, more distributed point source is achieve that better control, overall. So we really, improve speech intelligibility and speech clarity. And in this arena specifically, it's actually really challenging because you'll see, actually you can see in the picture that's up on screen now, the large, it's basically a large dome, right? And typically in these arenas, you have a lot of low steel. And above that low steel, between low steel and high steel, you might have, a large deployment of lapidary panels for low frequency absorption. And in this arena, we don't have that. And so we have to, there is, substantial absorption on the ceiling, and there's a large bass trap, and those help immensely. But yeah, we rely on the fact that, we deploy the technology properly and rely on the control of the arrays to really help with that control of the sound in the room.
Yeah, so like to pivot back real quick, for those of you joining us live on Teams, or if you're watching this on YouTube at a later date, we have a couple of different webinars we've done. One was a couple of weeks ago. It is in the library. It's all about line source optimization. It talks about how we gain directivity as the array gets bigger. And that one's really great to understand that the bigger you make this line source, the more directivity we get at a lower frequency. And so we're able to use just the array geometry to mitigate the need for as much low frequency absorption, right? That helps a bit. And then the second thing is, did they do a cardioid array here as well, Gino? Is that what the design had?
We did, in fact. Actually, I could switch to my screen really quickly, Dan, if you want to
fire
talk
away.
about that right now.
Certainly.
So what we did in this arena was actually deployed a hypercardioid arrangement of our KS28. So we have, let's say, 3 forward and 2 back. And what this does for us is, again, improve our low frequency pattern control. So you can kind of see the image on the right. We have significant rejection behind the array. And this, again, is just kind of critical in a space like this where, aesthetics, you're trying to, I think, balance aesthetics and performance of the system. So aesthetically, the intent was to have this large domed, architecturally really, really interesting arena. So we have to control that with our tools, with Case28 in cardioid, using our new CX preset, which gets us even better rejection than our standard preset. So all in all, I think it was really effective, and it's sounds quite good.
Andy, this looks like a lot more PA than I typically see at an arena house system. I mean, it honestly looks like a concert level PA. You have, is it 8 hangs of mains, which is K2 and Kara, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So the 8 hangs all on that truss that goes up and down, gives some flexibility for how we want to lay it out. And then there's some A15s inside the video board as well to help make sure we get that floor coverage universal. One of the pictures I know that Dan showed early on was that grand march during the rodeo. So you got all the dignitaries out there on the floor. It was impressed upon me very early when I got here that it's important that those folks hear their name, hear it loud, that the animals, the athletes, everybody down there on the floor gets that same experience as the people in the seats.
And that's even true nowadays. You go to a basketball game, and every time they're not playing, there's loud music playing, and it's as much for the audience as it is the players, I suppose, these days. And the same with the rodeo. I imagine your graduation events and your special events, that becomes really helpful to have a floor sound system separate of a house sound system, and be able to turn those zones on and off. Have you guys yet found a reason to only use the floor? If you've done an event on the floor only, do you turn the house off?
We have, so we didn't get a chance to execute it, but the NCAA gymnastics, actually the floor routine would have been centered underneath the video board, and so the music specialized for the floor routine would have come through that system. It would have been a little bit isolated in a different setup than we normally would have done. It's in the books. We'll come back to it. We'll do it next year, but yeah.
That's great. So actually, we're on screen. We're looking at, I see, Gino, is this the Soundvision model of the venue?
This is, yeah. And so I just brought up a mapping of the floor system specifically, which is using our E15 product. And yeah, one of the really great things about this arena is that because we have so much horsepower, in the scoreboard, underneath the scoreboard, we achieve more or less the same performance underneath as we do in the arena itself. So we can get up to 105 dBA weighted pretty easily under there. So we can accommodate, just about anything. So quite substantial, and yeah, it sounds great.
Is that? And forgive me, guys. I'm not as often involved in installs arenas. So Dan, is that typical for the floor system to have that kind of power level, or is this more atypical, specific for Dickies and their type of events?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more popular now. It's for, like Scott, you mentioned earlier about the pump up for the players. They like that. We do it in NFL. We do it in arenas. We do it, for NHL hockey, NBA. It's pretty common now to have something that is going to really have some, major PA energy that can hit the floor. What I wish was that they were all the same, and they're not all the same. Every one of them is different. So there are some are waterfalls that are split in half. Some are under the scoreboard. Some there's too much video under the scoreboard, so we don't have room for speakers there, and we have to take another approach. So it's a big challenge to the sound designers like WGHW to get that nailed down and work on what's going to be acceptable from the visual as well as audio.
And am I seeing, so that's an array of 5 KS28 Gino, and you have 4 of those arrays, is that correct?
We do. It's I believe it's north, south, east, west. We have those KS28 arrays. So there's actually not one per array, and actually Dan can speak to this. In between the team at L-Acoustics and the construction team came up with this really interesting concept where we kind of created these kind of false subwoofer, let's say, enclosures that they look like subwoofers, but they're not, and they actually hold all the cables when that truss is brought in and out. So again, there's a really, I think, a lot of emphasis placed on aesthetics for this arena, and down to the fact that we wanted it to look symmetrical, even though maybe the sound system wasn't perfectly symmetrical.
So the visual acoustics is the way I like to put it. Vic, I think in touring you've often had visual acoustics precedes actual acoustics, right?
Totally.
Right. Sometimes you just put a giant pile of something on the ground and tell everyone it's subwoofers, even if you don't need it.
Exactly.
So that's really neat. That's actually really cool. And Andy, how often is this coming up and down? Is it only down for service, or do you have to move it for other reasons?
Right now, we've only had to lower it down for service right after the rodeo. It was great, just from the standpoint we dropped it in an afternoon. We're able to clean it, take it back up to height, have it ready to go. It's also nice, though, when we get in some acts that aren't using it, we can raise it up out of the way. Everybody in the country raises their video board out of the way, but it's nice to be able to raise those speakers up out of the way, get a nice clean line of sight, make it more welcoming as folks walk into the arena. All eyes and focus and attention are on the stage where the artists want it, as opposed to on whatever else is flying around the ceiling.
Understood. And Bill, once again, why do you have to clean speakers after a rodeo?
A lot of dirt. We had 300 truckloads of dirt come in for the rodeo. We put 1 foot of dirt on the arena, 1 foot of dirt in the pavilion, and 100,000 square feet of exhibit space. All the animals live in the arena throughout the 23 days, so it gets quite dusty.
Huh. Well, I'll let you guys know, and if around the world you aren't aware of this, L-Acoustic speakers do quite well in dirt and dust. They're road tested through a number of rodeos in Texas and shows in the desert and much more. So that's really not a problem. And I think, Andy, did you guys just use the vacuum and the air compressor? Is that about all you did?
Pretty much, yep.
There you go. Simple as that. Very cool. So Gino, all right, we've done a design. It's a beautiful design of a sound system. Can you tell me about how, once it's installed, everything's working properly wired? Where do we go from there? What's the next big step in-house for the venue? What's the next big step for the sound system and for the touring acts, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Once I did want to touch really quickly on a few of the tools that we've been using to optimize the system once it's installed. Let's say the first being AutoSplay. We have these tools, these auto solvers that let us really work really quickly and optimize the system, first mechanically and then electronically. So, in the case of AutoSplay, we're defining, where we want our coverage to be, and then we can kind of quickly come to the optimal calibration, so you can kind of right now. Time and iterate through these, really have Soundvision iterate through these really quickly helps us to find the best solution without too much effort.
Yeah, so I'm going to just Gino, I'm just going to rehash that for 1 second because you were breaking up a little bit. And I have a feeling the internet around the world is struggling to keep up with all of us Skyping and Teamsing and WhatsApping and everything else. But AutoSplay is just a tool to find the best mechanical distribution for a given set of acoustic goals, right? So,
correct, yeah.
So in other words, our goal here is to come up with the best result. And Bill and Andy, I'm going to spin this to a Texas model. In a perfect world, you want a cow that's lived a happy life in Texas and eaten Texas grass and listened to nothing but George Strait, exactly. Who is just been really happy, and then you turn it into a steak, and then you let that steak sit for some period of time and age perfectly. And then you cook it with just a little bit of salt and pepper and butter, right? We don't want to season it a bunch. We just want to have a great organic, grass-fed, free-range, Texas loving, cowboy music listening steak to start, right? That's the beginning of what we want.
Yep.
All right, that works. Good analogy. All right, so then we can go on to step 2, right? How much salt and pepper do we need?
Yeah.
So you're still breaking up a little bit us on this, Gino. So I guess I'll talk.
Pepper,
oh, go ahead. Give it a try. Let's see if we can get it to work.
All right. So as far as the salt and pepper goes, I would say we use from there we've optimized our vertical, right? So now we can talk about our horizontal and how we can maximize our efficiency there. So panflex is really helpful here because we can narrow the horizontal directivity in portions of the array differently. So, looking again at the south array, for example, this is the array with no panflex. And then what we could do is we can narrow that up a bit. So we can go from 110 horizontal at the top of the array, and then we can change that to making that top of the array 70 degrees, right? So now our distribution of energy is, let's say, much more uniform across that south side of the arena. So that's your salt and pepper. And then, I guess the icing on top of that would be we can use our autofilter algorithms to further linearize the high frequency response of the system. So we go from, a response is actually, a cover is actually quite good, but maybe is not so uniform as we would like, to a very uniform response, vertically and horizontally. So just want to mention some of the tools that we use to really get these things into a really, really good place, even before we go on site and start calibrating.
Yeah, and that's really neat. That's so what you're actually showing here is something that you don't typically see in concert sound design. Vic, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically you don't target flat SPL distribution. You target maybe, let's say, a bit more practical for a music need, only because the sound system often isn't in the center of the room and up high. And so what we can see here, and maybe Gino, you can highlight that, is that the SPL from start to back, our mechanical and electronic target is what, 0 dB attenuation across the venue?
Yeah, it's actually a very aggressive target. As part of the performance criteria for this space was we wanted every seat to basically be the best seat in the house, right? And so we challenged the algorithm to do that. We challenged our product, and we are able to achieve it within, I think, our target of is 94%. So that's quite good.
So only 5% of this, the 5% of the seats are outside of that target. So exactly, every once in a while you get the electronics box on the plane in your footrest, and it's frustrating. But most of the seats have extra leg room and a full armrest, which is great. And that's really, really neat to see. So and that was, most of that's mechanical. The electronics are really just helping to smooth out the response, more or less, correct?
Yeah, correct. In fact, if I go back a slide, just mechanically, that response of the south array, that is what we get. So it's already quite good mechanically. And then, yeah, our auto filter settings are to, get that extra 5-10% on top of that.
Sure. So a little bit of salt, pepper, and butter, and we've got a great steak. That listens to George Strait and roams the fields and pastures of Texas.
Exactly.
Fantastic. I'm getting a bit hungry. Is it Whataburger or In-N-Out today? That's the real question. And has the Waffle House opened back up? So that's the signs in life that we're doing okay. So where do we go? I see in your Soundvision model, Gino, you've got the probes that indicate is that your calibration positions?
That's right. Yeah. So as part of let's say the L-Acoustics ecosystem, we now think about our calibration when we're building the model, when we're designing the system. And so each of those probes are actually physical locations that I went and measured the system at. So the intent was basically, measure each array on axis in 1/4 of the arena, also off axis, so that we have, on axis and kind of like a polar response of each. So we can look at both. And past that, we're looking at the overall response. So what I did was actually, in M1, I'm able to look at single arrays. I can look at combinations of arrays, and I can look at the complete system. So at each of these positions that I have here, I was performing, several groups of measurements. So, south array plus southeast array, and then I would take a measurement of everything. So now I can actually think about the contribution of, of different parts of the system at that particular point. So it's actually really, really powerful. And there's kind of a fun story about this particular calibration where, the venue is still under construction, and, running cable through a construction site is really difficult. So I took one channel of my wireless, and I basically went to all these points and measured them, just my tablet and access point. And I think I was able to do that all in under an hour. Once we have that, then You still have me, Scott?
Yeah, I got you. Perfect.
Great. Once we still have that, then we go into Network Manager. All those probe points that I've created in Soundvision will then show up in Network Manager as these little green blocks. And we can then go ahead and record our data. These are all our data points for the system. And then once that's recorded, we can go into Network Manager, evaluate them. And even after the fact, if I open this up live, so this is that same Network Manager file running live on my computer right now, I can look at, let's say, that K2 south array, and first off, I can evaluate each point vertically, so I can, when I'm actually there looking at the calibration, I can see that the system is working properly. But now, kind of in post-production with M1, I can look at this and say, okay, well, maybe somebody's complained that the south array is too bright. It has too much 7K, so I could take that down, for example, and I can look at what those changes are in real time in post-processing. So I can really, evaluate the performance of the system and make changes to the system with confidence without having to go back and remeasure. So some really, really powerful tools that we used to help calibrate the system, and it was quite effective. And I think one of the things that we did was hand this off to system techs who come through. And I think Vic has had some experience with this, so maybe you could share some of those with us.
Yeah, like I said earlier, once you have this information kind of available to do some pre-production planning, you can look at coverage and some of these kind of, alignment issues between the arrays and things like that, and look at frequency response and LF contour. Then you can really decide what needs to be done and, quickly and elegantly apply changes to the system to achieve your target SPL or your LF contour target. And that's exactly what we did for this. Just the screen that's on right now, we're looking at frequency response and, having a discussion with the system engineer and making some decisions really quick and deciding if the system's going to work and if we have available resources. And we'll kind of get into that here as we go along.
That's really neat. So for Gino, you were able to capture all this data, and just to remind everyone, M1 is the measurement part of the ecosystem that's integrated into the DSP and amplifier control software known as LA Network Manager. So we've got this amplifier DSP software, and within that we have a measurement platform. And this is different than anything that's ever existed. And this is a huge benefit for Andy and Bill, right? Because now you can see the control data. Hey, am I turned up or down? Is this EQ on or off? And you can actually see how that affects 40, 50 measurement locations in the venue without having to retake all this data. So this is a really powerful feature that's really hugely helpful for installs. Andy, have you had any requests yet for people to see the tuning of the house system? Has that happened, or was it just for the George Strait show that happened?
Just for the George Strait show so far. I'm sure that that's going to grow, especially once we put something like that on the books, that everybody's going to hear about it and try and emulate that. So
that's really neat. So yeah, we can now take a look at this from the comfort. Gino, it was a construction site. I'm assuming you did most of the actual calibration tuning work in your hotel room across the street. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And it was really helpful because, well, first off, a lot of this is done in simulation beforehand. So we're able to, obviously import all of our EQ choices direct from, Soundvision into Network Manager and make some tweaks from there. And then once the data was captured, I think we were on site for a few days. So, once we had that, just take it offline, have time to think about it and really, make good decisions without pink noise running constantly. And without, disrupting, the entire construction process. So I don't think anybody probably even knew that we were tuning the system, because with, a simple sine sweep, it was, pretty quick, done in an hour, and then the rest we did offline. So pretty
and this
powerful,
is really powerful.
And effective, yeah.
Yeah, I talk about this all the time. I think that what's really important, Bill, I don't know if this reaction is the same for you, but the first impression people hear of that sound system that they just spent a lot of money on is really important. And if the first time people really play music out of it, it's all tuned and time aligned and everything's put together, it's just a great experience. Do you remember your first experience hearing the system? Was it a perfect dinner at Michelin 3-star restaurant?
It was. I thought it sounded fabulous right away. And I know You guys were kind of tweaking things like, we need to fix this and that, but it sounded great. And one of the kind of milestones in the project was when we were able to turn music on during the day. You know, we had music playing for the construction workers throughout the day, and I think it was a definite, kind of momentum booster and a pick-me-up for everybody to kind of hear that, rock and roll and country and all that good stuff playing throughout the day.
Fantastic. Now, I saw Gino in your network manager setup. You had, it looked like 2 P1s. Are there 2 P1s installed on site as well, or is it just, did you bring one as well in addition?
There actually is one installed on site. That's a good question. And we did use that for part of the calibration. I had one as well, so I was just running that in the background. But the P1 in this venue actually serves a really important purpose as an on-ramp into the AVB ecosystem. So the distribution of audio is handled by, I think, a BSS unit that is delivering AAS out to the AVB processor and then the P1 processor. So that then takes the AAS and converts it to AVB for us.
Good. So the P1 is the bridge between different formats. It's sending AVB to the amps. Does it send also backup signal of analog or something else?
So the backup in this case is handled is separate from the P1, so that we eliminate that as a point of failure. So we just come BSS into the amplifiers, I believe analog, and then the P1 is delivering AVB. And this is also, of course, used in the case where we have somebody plugging into the system from an external source. It's very easy to take an analog or AS input and then route that to the amplifiers as needed. So it's an important piece, and one that we're seeing more and more kind of as a standard, let's say, standard deployment for large facilities like this for that reason.
And I think that swings us perfectly. Great segue to Andy. So George Strait was it the first show? I think he has a tradition of opening venues in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, correct?
Yeah, we had a couple land right before that one, but he was there in that first month. So definitely the first one that a lot of people were looking forward to around here.
Good. And George Strait, we talked a bit about him from the Dallas, Texas, Fort Worth area, correct?
I think he lives down close to Austin now, is that right?
I thought he was originally from West Texas, but yeah, I think now he lives by Austin.
I got it. Okay, so but he's a Texas hero and has, for those of you listening around the world, I believe it is 6,521 number one hits. Is that right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, if he played a concert of just his number one hits, it would probably take 9 or 10 hours. So he's a huge star in country music in North America, and plays very few shows these days, and they're much more special events. What was Bill? Was this a goal of the venue to get George, or did George call you guys?
Yeah, I think we really wanted to start with a big splash, with one of our first events. He was the first concert we announced. Like Andy said, we had some warm up stuff kind of leading into it. We didn't, we wanted that show to kind of, so we were fine tuned and well-oiled machine by the time we got to George Strait. But we went on sale with George Strait for the first show, and from what I understand, it was the fastest selling show in Ticketmaster history. Shortly after that, we announced the second show, and it went like lightning as well. We could have easily sold multiple nights for him, but yeah, it was very, very popular. It was perfect for our fan base, and it was a great kind of event for us.
Cool. And Andy, what was the process of integrating with George and Company production management? It's a really great team that does his events. What were the challenges there to do that?
So the first hurdle to jump through was in the construction process. They flew out to see the system after it got turned on, after it got commissioned, kind of hear it, understand could that really suit their needs. I think they spent 45 minutes just turning it up, walking around, pretending like they were doing things, but otherwise just enjoying the day. They came down, told us it was the perfect system for them. They could build anything in the world. That's what they would build. We'll see you in November. They came in, a day early, loaded their stuff in, loaded in video content, got the lighting rig underneath the video board put in place, patched in pretty quick and easy. I mean, they were off and running. That, their comments were just rave reviews as they set up, as they tested, and then as they went through the first and second night. So it was really, really easy from our standpoint. Limits the trucks out on the dock, limits the stuff we're having to push across the floor, makes just the whole load-in process a lot easier for us.
Sure, and tell me, they had to supplement the system a bit. It wasn't the floor system wasn't designed for a center stage concert experience. So did they reconfigure your house system, or did they rent in additional gear?
Yeah, so Vic can probably talk to that a little bit, but there was some rented gear just right there around the stage for those VIP seats, the first 10, 15 rows that you're focused on filling.
Yeah, that's right.
And Vic, what did they bring in to supplement the house system? Did they bring in some K1 or K2, or was it something a bit more compact?
Car down. And the big thing too, the pictures on the screen right now is a pretty compact lighting and video infrastructure underneath that scoreboard. So the system that's in there, and I'll just share my screen real fast because I have it pulled up now. Let's see here. Hopefully you guys can see that.
Waiting for it. Is it coming through? There it is. Great.
There you go.
Yeah, so just kind of a top down, you can see the existing system, the fill system right here. We talked about A15s covering the floor, but because of that compact other stuff, the lighting and video underneath the scoreboard, we had to supplement something else. So I'll just actually hide that. You can see where pretty dramatically where the coverage of the main system stops.
Oh, okay,
and then
yeah, sure.
And then I'm going to turn on the supplement system that was brought in to complement the main system, and then transition from the main system into the all the way to the downstage edge, so to speak. So that's all car, and you can kind of see. I'll see if I can get a better kind of underneath angle of the scoreboard there. And if you guys remember from the picture before, that's all very compact, tucked inside the mother grid with the other visual components. And then down below, really oh, go ahead, Scott.
No, it's really neat. So they just had to bring in, what does that look like? 8 arrays of 6 Cara, is that correct?
Yep, car pullbacks, and relatively easy. There is a lot of overlap, so that speaks a lot to thinking about where to time align the system and where coverage can start and stop. But one of their priorities with coverage and for this show is to have very, very in your face, and obviously priority to the people closest to the stage that are, obviously paying the most. Obviously, we want good coverage for those people. And then at the very, very front are just these little lip fills. You can see I got it kind of circled with my mouse here.
Yep.
Just more cars, kind of a front fill sort of thing that just cover the first maybe 2 rows, and then then the rest of it coming for good intelligibility and good coverage. And then also the subs.
Go ahead, Vic, sorry.
Just say the subsystem here, pretty straightforward. Again, we're not relying too heavily on the ground subs because they're only going to cover the floor really. So what we have is kind of 4 clusters of cardioid across in the corners. And then that's the idea there is to minimize energy on the stage. So we have more headroom there, and they're not really too huge fans of low end. So that's important. And then combine that system, align it with coverage with the main flown system as well. So.
No, that's great. So yeah, not a ton of sub on the ground there for an in the round show. I mean, it seems like a lot of sub when you go that there are 20 in the air, and it looks like there's another 16 on the ground, or sorry, 32 on the ground. Pardon me. Right. It seems like a lot, but once you go in the round, the efficiency capability of a subwoofer system is a bit more challenged. Unless, of course, you can put them all perfectly in the middle. If I recall, with George Strait, is it still the background singers are in the center of the stage? Is that right?
Oh yeah, yep. They're all they're all clustered right there. So.
Yeah. So the nice thing is it's not the kick drum right in the center. That's a mistake that everyone does once. Is put the drummer right in the middle of the stage when it's an in the round show. And no matter what you do in life, it's hard to not build a buildup when you're equidistant from every single PA source. No matter how directional it is, that's always a challenge. That's really cool. So Vic, were you on site there? Did you guys use then the house calibration file and grow on it? Did you start a whole new calibration file? How did that work?
Yeah, we obviously grew on the one that Gino was just showing, the network manager file. We kind of discussed that in advance and talked about what the coverage goals were in LF Contour, and loaded that up, and I basically had a network manager file for the house system, and then a kind of separate network manager environment. I'm just gonna pop back to the picture.
Yep.
If you could take that back over the PowerPoint. Either way, and then look at that system where a separate network manager to control the supplement system that was brought in for the specific show. And I think the thing is looking at frequency response of the house system, and then matching that tonal balance to the supplement system that's on the floor, which is difficult because they have dramatically different characteristics in their physical geometry.
Sure, understood.
So
understood.
It's good to have. That's the perfect picture right there.
Cool. That's really neat to see. Now, Andy, how this was your first big event using the sound system for not a house gig, right? So how quickly was that integration? Was it 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days of them getting going, or were they up and running in a couple hours?
I think it was a couple hours. I think it was that afternoon. But once we got the path down and all snapped together pretty quick, that
well, that's great. I mean, easy integration. Getting that audio on board through that ecosystem from the artists themselves into the AVB network with the P1 to the amplifiers. That's really great to see. So post COVID-19 and everything, what's when everyone's back to normal and we can do as many shows as we want? What are you guys looking forward to? Bill, what's your next most exciting show that happens? Have you got something that you had bought tickets for you and the family and the wife and the kids? And is it the monster trucks or is it Frozen on Ice? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, obviously we're all in a very interesting world, and the sports and entertainment industry is really kind of walking a tightrope and trying to figure out what we're going to do. But we do have some high school graduations that are still looking into July. So we're excited to utilize our venue for something like that, utilize the sound system for that. End of July, we do have WWE. So that's always a fun, professional wrestling's always a fun family show to come see. And we also have a esports event that we're looking early August as well. And then, a lot of our concerts and stuff will kind of start filling in throughout the fall.
Great. I got a couple questions coming in on the live stream, and I thought these are quite good. Do you mind if I don't know if Andy or Gino or Dan, I'm not sure who knows this answer best, but someone was asking where the amp room's located. I'll give it Andy first.
So the amp room's up on the gallery level, our 4th floor. So it's on the south end of the arena. So there's 4 sets of 4-inch conduit that run up then to the center truss and run everything down through there. So it's all centralized there on the south end. I think there was a picture of that up earlier, side by side with our amp room. Nice, clean little rack room there.
And it's one amp rack room for the entire system. So you have one long cable run. I suppose with the central truss, it all comes down together anyways.
Yep.
How long of a cable run do you end up with?
I would say probably close to 600 feet by the time it goes vertical up into the catwalk. Is that close, Dan?
I think so. Yeah, it's a pretty good hike. And we have prediction tools, so we ran the predictions ahead of time, so we knew what to expect. And Gino knew that he would need some compensation at that distance, obviously.
That's cool. That's great.
Yeah,
and I saw the response actually looked pretty good, honestly, Gino. It didn't look like a 600-foot cable run. So for those at home, the biggest single effect of a long cable run typically is on the high frequency. And so you get an attenuation in the high frequency due to the absorption of that signal in the cable, if you will, or the transfer of voltage is not as efficient at high frequency. But it didn't look like it on a measurement. I saw a response up to 12, 13K, which is quite outstanding for a space like this. So that's great to see. And then there was another question. I'll give this to Gino. The scoreboard system was A15s. How many are in each array?
So we have 2 A15s per array. I can bring that up here real quick. Stand by. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can kind of see them here. There's 4 arrays, 2 each.
2 each. Is a focus and a wide? It looks like.
Yes.
A focus and a wide is the focus is at
wide.
70 as well.